Okay, welcome to the Love Fly Fear of Flying Q&A. It's what time is it? 5:30 UK time. Paul Tizard here, one of the behind the scenes people, one of the admins at Love Fly. Thank you very much for joining tonight. Settle yourself in. It's a bit of a longer one tonight. So we have some great questions, which are going to need a little bit of explaining. I also need to apologise in case my voice goes anything weird because I've just been off for like most best part of a week with a dodgy some horrible bug, and so you know what it's like. The voice goes and everything, so it might be sounding a bit more husky than normal, or it might even leave altogether. So, and yeah, so I'll be sipping water and generally pausing a bit more than I would do normally. And I want to just say, so first of all, first things first, as always, welcome to all the new members. Thank you so much for joining the group. Don't know how you found out about us, but we always like to know. I know when you join, you have to put, so you have the option to tick how you heard about us, but it's really useful to us to know, where people are coming from. Some, if it says just recommended by somebody, we don't always know who that is, of course. So if you do get a chance to drop a message in the Facebook group sometime, I'd love to know. It just helps us to know sort of like, where people are coming from, basically. And everybody's at different stages, so we know that sometimes it'd be recommended by a friend who's been helped by the group or the podcasts or the courses that we run. But it can also just be a random search where it's come through Google or something. So it's just helpful. Okay. So that's that. So welcome, new humans. You're in a very supportive place. This is a great group. Um, we're really, really proud to be all part of it. There's quite a few of us behind the scenes now, and we just love the fact that, to be honest, most of the support comes from individuals within the group itself, who may well be over their fear of flying, or they may still be battling like you are. So don't be afraid. If you know something, please share it. So please chime in. And if you have an answer that you think might help someone, please just say it, because two reasons. One is engaging in the group helps you. And secondly, uh, please don't assume that what you know is what other people know, because everybody's got their own fears. So even if you say, I have a fear of turbulence, you might think, oh, that's the same for everybody, but it's not. And it's absolutely not. So different people have it for different reasons. It started for different reasons. It comes on for different reasons. It shows itself in different ways. So don't assume that what you know isn't good stuff, because it probably is, and it might help somebody with your perspective or a bit of insight or knowledge or something else, some content or something that you know about that the rest of us, and we all learn from it. So please keep doing that. So thank you. All right, we have now 4,000 members. Can you believe that? Just amazing. So we think it didn't start that long ago, and it's just gradually growing, and then we've had these little spurts of it, and every week we see more and more people coming out. So Welcome Wednesday is the current institution where Susan puts out a message welcoming all the new people in. So you'll see how many people are joining each week. It's just fantastic. So thank you. Keep doing that. It's lovely. Right. Two things. I'm going to have a bit of a rant today. I've got to, you get to a certain stage in life. I've reached that stage. I never said I'd do this, where you shout at the TV. Do that. Shout at the television when you see a load of rubbish going on there. Well, I've got to that stage, folks, where I've seen some crap on the TV, and it's just, I mean, I see the stuff in the media about aircraft incidents, and that makes me go crazy as well, because I just think that's rubbish. That didn't happen. That isn't the case. And so that's bad enough. Okay. But my recent rant is a Hollywood film, and I cannot believe how many inaccuracies there are in there. And if you were to watch this film, you'd be like, oh my goodness, is it like that? So I'm going to have a little rant in a minute. So settle in for this, because I just think I just was watching this film, and I had to watch it. I think I managed about 15 or 16 minutes, and then I had to stop watching because it's such crap. There was a couple of things that were accurate, and it's got a good cast in it, and it's everything about it. You think, oh, looks legit, but some of the stuff which the film is based upon is just crap, and it just if I'd had hair, I would have been pulling it out, because it just made me nuts. And so the plane is the film. Plane, avoid it, because it's just riddled with inaccuracies. Okay, so I'm not going to go through any more of it. I mean, I know I like Gerard Butler. I think he's great, in lots of other films, but in this film, he's been given some bum lines to read out and some stuff that he says and does. I was just like, you joking me, aren't you? And literally in the first 20 minutes, there's so many things that just aren't true about commercial aviation. But I'm going to stop there before I get myself in trouble. Even though this is a private group, you never knew who's watching. So I'm just going to stop and say, do not watch it if you're a nervous flyer, because it put things in your head which are not true. Okay? I'll get down from that one. So lots of great questions this week. So fantastic. And I'll tell you about the tomorrow's podcast, which you're going to love, by the way. Particularly for those who love a good geek out, you're going to love tomorrow's podcast. But I'll tell you about that at the end. So sorry, you'll have to wait. Right, loads of questions. Let's go through them. I've got some more. I'm just going to read them off my phone because then I've got the actual words that people have said. And obviously, if anybody else pops any in as we're going along, I won't see them as you're doing it until afterwards. So I might miss some of them. So apologies for that. By the way, do you like the merch? This is available on the Lovefly website. If you go to the lovefly.co.uk, go in there and you will see a little button that says shop. You can get things like this, little Lovefly t-shirts and stuff like that. Just a little plug there. Right, let's just have a quick look at these there questions. Righty-ho. Okay. Right. This is from Haley. Thanks, Haley. So how can I help my 11-year-old being anxious and nervous about flying? I'm an anxious flyer also, but we fly tomorrow and she's just messaged me saying she's anxious and nervous about flying. Okay, so this is what we would call last minute help needed. Okay, so it depends what your motivation is. I'll give you a few options, right? But I think one of the things you need to be thinking about is what you do next. And one of the best things I always say, nervous flyers tend to be around other nervous flyers. So anyone within that sort of family group that sorts themselves out can have a ripple effect on others. And we've seen this many, many, many times before. So this is not, like feel guilty about passing on fears or encouraging fears, etc. This is just normal stuff which happens in families. All right. So let's just park that. It's happened. It's the past has passed. But that's what can we do now? So you got your flight tomorrow. So it's not very long, but it's not impossible for you to do some practical things. If you can be bothered, there's a few podcasts I'd recommend. One that was deliberately written or recorded with this in mind, and it's called something like "Oh crap, I have a flight tomorrow," and it's episode 130 on the Love Flight podcast. It's about an hour and a half, but there's lots of really good tips in there and some nice little bits of advice from various recovered nervous flyers, but also from some of the team as well, from the Love Fly team. So please have a look at that one if you can be bothered to go it. Another one, which is quite a good sort of overall thing, is episode 69 in the Love Fly podcast, which is actually our audio book, which is again about an hour and a half. And it's me droning on, talking you through all the stages of flight and all the rest of it. But there's lots of things for you to think about in there. If you want a kind of a quick and dirty, there's one which is really early on. It's like episode 4, episode 5. It's something like Why Trust Pilots. And there's one around there as well about turbulence as well. So there are a couple of quick ones that you could listen to together. So that's a couple of audio options. Okay, the next thing I could suggest is you could do something really practical, which is to download the Pete Higgins flight checklist, which you can find in the files section of this Facebook, of the Love Fly Facebook group. And it's also, if you can't find it, then email us team@lovefly.co.uk and we'll send you a copy of it. But in there is Pete kindly gifted by going through thousands of flights himself, everything that happens from start to finish, and then put a little commentary next to it. And you do it like a checklist. So you literally could, if you downloaded that now, print it off, and then just visualize going through each of these stages and knowing that this is what's going to happen. It's predictable. It happens on every flight with every aircraft. Okay, so give or take a few minutes. This is how it works always. A lot of people find great comfort in that. Many take it with them every single time and just like tick it off. Okay, so that is what I would suggest. Okay, at this stage, those are things to do. You get a chance to listen to it. Episode 130 is your go-to. Oh crap, I've got a flight tomorrow, and that'll give you some practical things to do. But do think longer term as well. What can you do next? And that's actually very helpful. Just thinking like, okay, so I've got to get through tomorrow, whatever happens. Let's talk about this. We'll get through it together. Let's use the checklist or whatever resources we'll find helpful just to get us thinking about it in a sort of helpful, practical way. But what are we going to do when we get back? And that is when you might start looking around at different resources available, like some of the ones we've got, but also there may be other things that are helpful for you. Hope that's useful. Haley, tick that one off. Give it an answer. Hopefully it's a useful one. This is June. Let me just have a quick read while I drink. Might be noticed I've got this mic place here. Call it an iMic because someone gave me some feedback. Said, when you have it lower, all I can hear is you breathing, and it sounds weird. So obviously, I either breathe too heavy, which is not good, or this is a very sensitive mic. So it's now an iMic. Okay, just in case you're wondering why I've put it in the wrong place. Maybe you don't care. So June says, can an aircraft ever be too old to fly? And when are aircraft usually scrapped? So technically, an aircraft is never too old to fly. The age of it's not the problem. It's whether it's still maintained. So if you think of it, so if you think what does an aircraft cost to build to begin with, it's like millions and millions of pounds. So you already know they're super well made. And then they're also being maintained every single day. And this is along regulation. So if you take any aircraft, from the minute it comes out the hangar, it's already a bunch of stuff done to it to make sure it's certified. But to keep its certification and to allow it to fly commercially, it has to have certain checks done at certain times, and they're not negotiable. These are legal, and you have to do them to keep the aircraft, and it's bloody expensive. Okay, so not something that you would do lightly. Now, if you think about it, you already start with some of this cost. Let's just say it costs 40 million. It's obviously more than that, but let's just say it did, right? You're not looking at some sort of thing that's just going to go wrong because everything about it is built with the idea of extra precautions. So, for example, if you know that a certain part of an aircraft is going to wear at, say, 10 years, they'll replace it at 5 years. Does that make sense? So they're already ahead of the curve anyway. And there is no single anything. So there's no single point of failure. So we're always thinking about backups, etc. So you've got a lot of safety redundancy built into it, as we call it, like capacity. So you think about that. Now, with an aircraft which is, say, 5, 10, 15 years old, it's going to be easier and cheaper to maintain that than it will be as it starts to get older. But you could still do it. You could be flying around a 40-year-old 747, if you like, but it would be really expensive because the maintenance on it would be that much more rigorous, and everything would have been replaced pretty much. It won't be anything like it started. I doubt there's going to be very much of the original aircraft still on there because it would have been replaced. So technically, there's never too old. But it's like if you had I don't know, like a 30-year-old car, how much would that cost to keep on the road? And how much maintenance would so you've got to think, and that's not even made anywhere near as well as an aircraft. So you've got a car that's maybe costs 15,000 to make versus 40 million. Already we're talking different things here. So I hope that usually they're scrapped, not particularly scrapped, not always scrapped. Sometimes they're just going to park them in the desert because they don't know what to do with them, because they're just too expensive to keep maintaining. But they could still fly. They just choose not to. So Anya says, excuse me a sec. So I have three quite silly questions. So we always say this, there's no silly questions, okay? Plenty of silly answers, but no silly questions. I know that turbulence are not really dangerous to the plane, not at all dangerous, all right? But in my case, the most frightening part about turbulence is that I'm always afraid they would tear the wings apart or break them. Is this possible? I suppose it's not, but how can I convince nervous flyers of that? Okay, so it's not possible because they're tested to destruction when they make these things. And so there are, Captain Steve Bull always talks about this, that when they made the 787, like they do with all aircraft, they put them in these huge, I don't know what they call them, machines, let's call it that for one, and they deliberately bend the wings to see how much they can bend them until they break. And with the 787, I think they almost got them to touch. There's so much strength and flexibility in them. And this is way more than if you're sat looking over a wing as you're flying along, it looks like it's moving up and down a lot. That's the aircraft suspension like you have on a car. But it hardly moves anything. But it can move massive amounts and there'll be no damage. So turbulence won't do that. Okay, so is turbulence a potential threat for safety when the plane is landing? I don't know if this is the right word for it. I don't see it as potential threat. It's more about crosswinds and the landing, the conditions, the pressure, etc., etc. There's a lot that's involved in that, and I'm not qualified to answer that technically. So I'm going to skip that one and refer you. There are podcasts where they talk about this. Captain Steve. So go into the Love Light podcast. You can find so there's Captain Emma, there's Captain Steve, Captain Pete Legg, Captain Dave. Any of those, if you listen to them, they often talk about these. So any of the pilot ones, they'll talk about this. So and what's in place, and possibly there may be a pilot that jumps in and answers this thread as well, so that they'll give you a more technical thing. But it's more about the crosswind limits. And so just to give you a sort of thing, we have what we call safety envelopes. And so, for example, if you can land this type of aircraft, this pilot with this amount of experience at this speed with this amount of crosswind, that's what we'd call like an envelope of safety, for what that's lay terms calling it. Okay. Now, one knot out of that, outside of that, they don't land. They'll do a go around or wait. Okay, so it's really strictly controlled, that type of thing. So turbulence itself, depending on what sort of turbulence it is really just about air movement. So I'm straying out of my lane here. So yeah, so I'd say suggest listen to the podcast on this one, because that'll give you a little bit more technical explanation around that. But essentially the answer is all wind is considered, and there are limits around the direction, the speed, etc., when it comes to take off or landing. So is landing at special airports like Madeira's more dangerous than at other destinations? I heard Captain Emma answer this once, because she did this in her podcast, and I love the way she described it. I'll sort of paraphrase, is that when you're thinking about airports that seem tricky to us, the pilots that land at them have special instructions and they practice them, so whilst it might seem like we might use the word tricky, they would love it because they think, yeah, this is a great challenge. However, the pilots that are landing at these regularly, like like Emma used to work for a no frills airline before, they're doing this all the time, so they get used to these different routes in and some of the challenges. And so, and even if a pilot was to come up for an airport they'd never landed at before, they don't just rock up. They'll have a briefing. They'll know about it. If it's a diversion and they weren't expecting to land there, they have really clear instructions about what they need to do and clear vectors, etc., to move around. So it's not like they're just going to go, oh, let's give it a go. It's not like that. Hope that answers that. Amelia. So are there current courses you can take where you board a plane, take a short flight to help overcome fear? Well, as you know, or may not know, in my previous course that I ran with some of my colleagues in this very Love Fly group, we used to run courses with flights. And the reason we stopped doing those was that, well, the pandemic kind of scuppered that, but also it's massively expensive. But what it forced us to do is to think about what is it that people need. So yes, the straight answer is there are courses out there where you can go and do a short flight. And in the UK, you've got two providers, I think at the moment, British Airways and EasyJet. Different costs, different models, the way that they operate it, but essentially, yes, you get to do a flight if you want to do it. And people have found them somewhere between exceptionally helpful or actually made me worse. Most people find it helpful, provided it's part of a process of beating the fear. Because the actual thing that helps somebody to get over their fear is being ready to do one of those courses. So if you do it too soon, then it can actually make you worse because you're not ready and you're surrounded by other people who might be anxious, and it kind of can rub off a bit. But if you're at that point where you've done a bit of work already and then you go and do a course like that, it can be massively helpful. And lots of people I know, thousands have known over the years, have done exactly that. But do it for yourself and when you're ready to do it. And it might mean that you don't necessarily get the location you want or the date that you want. But if it is important, make sure that you get it in line with some other stuff that you're doing, because I don't believe any of these are a one-stop shop, which is why we're not doing the ones with flights at the moment. We've got courses where you go into an aircraft cabin that's parked on the ground in a warehouse, and it's completely configured the same as an aircraft, and we do stuff in there because a lot of the research we know now is that the proximity of flight is enough to help with the fear of flying. So if you're doing practical activities that help you, in an environment which is aircraft, it is an aircraft, it's just parked on the ground. That can be enough for a lot of people. So it's just about thinking about what's right for you. There's not so many in other countries. I don't know where you are from. So if you put that in the chat later, we may be able to help you a bit with that. Okay. Chantel, how likely is that a plane will experience severe turbulence? I understand something like 0.1% of the atmosphere has severe. I've no idea about that. Okay, so you sound very into having a look for it at the hotspots. Does this 1% include both the more predictable mountain waves, thunderstorms, etc., non-predictable, i.e., clear air? You know your onions, don't you, as we say? So you've got some good knowledge about it. I think one of the things that I always found reassuring is that Captain Steve says this in quite a few of the podcasts and some of our webinars and things like that. And it just says that in the 30 years of the flying that he did, that only 4 or 5 times did he encounter severe turbulence, and it was literally moments, sometimes a few minutes. But it wasn't that the aircraft was in danger, it was just really uncomfortable and very jumpy about it. But at no point were you in danger. If you're strapped in, then you're okay. The accidents that happen to people where they get injured tend to be if they're walking about. And it's like a really, really rare time that you're up and about and there's suddenly unexpected, well, any turbulence. Okay, this is because normally we got some idea because you think about pilots, and this is Steve that does this much better justice than I do. But you're on a flight path, and the pilots are all talking to each other, so they'll say, there's chop or turbulence at this point. You might, and also they've got ride reports, they've got sort of flight planning to be able to think about these type of things. So they already have some idea where there might be some turbulence. But again, it's just air movement. You can't expect the air not to move. It's natural. We like it. And there will come a point where you can kind of just sort of, rather than trying to analyze where I might go, when to fly, what's the safest time, and etc. like that, it's accepting the fundamental truth is that as long as you're strapped in, no harm is going to come to you. You might not like it. It might go on for ages. I know some people have said I've been in turbulence for ages, but the definition of light, moderate, and severe are very clearly defined, and that's you can find on the IATA website. So when we talk about severe, we mean a very specific thing, which sounds like you know what you're talking about here. But I don't know how to help you with that. But just to sort of say that this is a very, very rare thing. You've got your seatbelt on. It might surprise you. You might not like it, but you're safe. And yes, occasionally, and I mean very occasionally, people get hurt. But to be honest, most of the people that get hurt are cabin crew because they're up and about, walking about, even when you might be strapped in with your seatbelts. You know, because cabin crew are used to walking about in turbulence with their special gravity footwear. No, they're just used to it. You just walk differently. I can't describe it, but you just get used to it, and so you don't stumble when other people might. Because they're just amazing. They're just like superhumans. That's all there is to it, really. I don't know if that helps, but that's my start at that one. So Adriana's got a couple of questions here, again around turbulence. Maybe turbulence is an important topic. Is there a lot of turbulence when the weather is snowy or rainy? Yes and no. There can be a lot of turbulence when it's sunny. It's a complicated thing. When we talk about turbulence on the podcast, like I said, episode 4 or 5, whichever one it is, which talk about turbulence, and there's a few others as well. And we often talk about all the different types and how you can have turbulence or air movement on a day when you think it looks absolutely clear sky, because it's, you know, that's what it does. The air does that, doesn't care. So it's something to think about, is that when we look up and we see what we think will be a trouble isn't necessarily going to create a choppy ride for us. That's why we have flight planners. Okay, so we try and route around shitty weather because we just don't want to go through it. It's not because it's unsafe. I mean, we won't go through the middle of a storm, but we just don't want to be in horrible weather. You know, we will go into other bits where, like jet streams, or we cross into a jet stream and you'll get a little bit of ripple then sometimes, you might not. But we try to avoid it. And that's what the pilots and the flight planners do, is to try and give you a smooth ride, you know, much as you can when you're fighting Mother Nature. And the last question, you said, how fast can a plane land quickly if there's a lot of turbulence? And is it a lot of turbulence to do that? I know that the pilots have told me they can get down very, very quickly. I mean, like super quick, but that's not the issue. It's landing in if you're thinking about landing, it's got to be a suitable landing environment. So not just any old airport, because the facilities might not be there. So even if you could land, if the runway is the correct length for the type of aircraft you've got, so you've got enough stopping distance, it might be that facilities are rubbish there. So you don't want passengers stuck where the facilities are rubbish. So yes, you can get down, you can descend rapidly if you want to. Would there be turbulence? It would be, you'd feel it, but whether it be turbulent or not depends on your perception. Because I know I've had people tell me they've been in where they've had to descend because of slow decompression, and the masts have come down, and they've gone, okay, so straight away they come down to 14,000 feet, and people have filmed it on their phones and said, look, we're dropping out the sky, and it's absolute crap. You're not dropping, you're descending at a controlled rate, but you can get down pretty quickly. But actually, it will feel super, super smooth for most people. But obviously, some people won't feel that. They'll think it was horrendous. I felt like we were flying fast. And that's no disrespect, but we all have these fantastic imaginations. And when we have an anxiety about something, we tend to fill in the gaps about what might be going on, because we don't have altimeters, we don't have forward vision. And so our brains and our sensory systems kind of make sense of what's going on. And often it's not quite right. And I mean that in the most respectful way. Right. Let's see if there's any others come in. Right, okay. Okay, so Rosalie, I can see your questions come up now, so thank you for that. In 2 weeks, I've flown a Boeing 737-800, fantastic aircraft, by the way. Is there any reason to worry about this plane, given it is a Boeing? Straight answer, no. It's not in Boeing's interest. There's a lot of nonsense in the media, always. It's the thing is about commercial aviation, it's a super sexy topic, isn't it? And something goes wrong in any way, shape, or form, because it's so rare, that makes it fantastic news. So sorry to be cynical, but that is the truth. Do you know what I mean? So it's very easy. So is there anything to worry about quality control? No. If that helps, but that's the answer. So it's very easy to get drawn into these things, and I think that sometimes we are very susceptible to it. And the reality is that most of this is just the media creating these stories. And it's very infuriating when you work in commercial aviation, seeing some of the stuff that goes out there, a bit like that film I mentioned earlier on, don't get me started. There's just so much stuff out there which is just untrue, and it's exaggerated, or when if an incident happens, it gets investigated and it's public knowledge and everybody shares it. And if there's any doubt whatsoever, they just ground the aircraft and that's it. There's a massive cost. Can you think to that? The cost to any business to do that. Whatever you do, they just said, right, we're going to shut up shop. We're not using that, whatever it is, that whole shop we're not going to use. We're not going to use, that's what they're going to do. So if you ran a fleet of ships, they say, right, something wrong with the ships, stop all the ships. Can you imagine the cost? That's what they do in aviation, because it's just not worth it. Safety is the first priority. Like, because without safety, there is no business. So although things aren't perfect anywhere in the world, I have a very strong belief in commercial aviation, and nothing is going to shake that. It's unwavering, because I just know the professionals that work in it. I know the amount of training and backups and checking, and oh my goodness, if you could just see, you will probably see a fraction of it on some of our courses that we run, but it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So, two announcements. So we have a Manchester course coming up, which is face-to-face. We have a discounted hotel nearby if you can make it. It is a whole one-day course. We have only got a few places left on it and would love to fill it up. We haven't run a face-to-face course for quite a while now, so it'd be lovely to run our first face-to-face, because everything else has been webinars and stuff like that. It'd be great to do one of those again. So, before the pandemic, I was running courses. We could sometimes get to 100 or 200 people on them. Can you imagine that? So we're starting again, if you like, running some slightly different versions of it. But this is going to be a super friendly, supportive day. And it's going to be in an aircraft environment. So you get a chance to try all the stuff out. And there's only going to be 20 people there. So plus us. And it's just going to be great. So all the sort of the regulars that you see in Love Fly, and it's just going to be a super, super, super day. And also you can pay for it in installments. So if you're looking at it going, oh, that's a bit steep, I don't think it is. But to find out more, you can go on to lovefly.co.uk, then just click on courses, and you'll see some of the options there. It's the next Manchester face-to-face, which is on the 13th of April. I'd love to see some of you there. I know some of you are going, but let's have a few more, please. The second announcement is tomorrow's podcast. So the podcast this week is with Concorde Captain John Tye, and this is a doozy of an episode. It is just brilliant, really inspiring. Aside from the fact he's a Concorde pilot, he's brought out this book called Life of a Concorde Pilot: From the Orphanage to the Edge of Space. And that just gives you a slight flavour of his humble beginnings and what he's achieved. And Concorde is just one of several aircraft types that he flew in his 40-odd years of being a commercial pilot. But there's some great stuff in their safety, but it's also a proper geek out. So check that out. Love Fly podcast, available in all the normal places, including our website. If you go onto lovefly.co.uk and just click on help, you can get the podcast directly from there, or you can go on Spotify, Amazon, Google, etc. But yeah, hope you enjoy that. So thank you very much for all the questions. If I miss any, we'll try and answer them in the comments afterwards. I think I've got all the ones that I've seen. Obviously, as I'm working off two screens here, I can't see them sometimes till afterwards. So apologies if I have missed your question, but I will promise you that we will answer it before we die, or tonight. whichever's the soon. Okay, so thanks for tuning in, folks, and look forward to seeing you in the podcast tomorrow. And Captain John Tye, take care.